Sometimes I feel like the digital version of a guy who went off into the wilderness and built a cabin for himself and just lives in peace. And if you were that guy, what is a day like for you? You get up in the morning, you make a cup of coffee, you go for a walk. If there's something you need to do around your homestead, you do that. You know, it's pretty simple stuff, right? You watch the sunset. If you have a neighbor, maybe you talk to the neighbor. There's just not really a lot that you worry about. You get up, you live your life, you enjoy your life, you rinse and repeat, and every day winds up being remarkably similar, a lot like the days that preceded it. And if you have to tell someone what it is that makes you interesting or what it is that makes your life meaningful, maybe you read a good book. Maybe you had a good idea while you were going for that evening walk. One of those light bulb moments when you felt mentally stimulated personally, but it wasn't any huge achievement. It wasn't anything that's worth putting on the resume. And that's okay. Today I wanted to talk about how we look at life as if we're supposed to achieve something that's meaningful. We're supposed to have something that's good enough to brag about, something that can make other people envious of us, something that'll make other people feel like they want to be part of our circle. And it doesn't really matter whether you find your peace playing the same old MMO every day, or if you find your peace living off in solitude somewhere off the beaten path. There's something to be said for a life which doesn't really have any mountaintop experiences, and it doesn't really have any desolate valleys either. It's just a life well lived. And maybe that's comparable to reaching a sort of a functional end game. When you've done the things that you really need to do, and you start to realize that you're okay in the place you currently are. I used to play a lot of World of Warships, and I still have the game client installed. Once in a while I will still play that game, but I've kind of reached the point in that game where I have a tier 6 ship or 2, I think. I don't know. In any case, I'm not really high ranking in that game. I just kind of got to the halfway point, unlocked a few cool ships that I think are fun to play. They're not super low tier, they're just kind of a middle of the road, but they're fun to play. And I don't feel that I would get anything more out of hardcore grinding the game to try to get a tier 10 ship. It just doesn't really feel worth it. And I'm not saying I'll never do that, but I just don't want to spend tons and tons of time trying to unlock something which ultimately I'm probably not going to care that much about, even if I do get it. So in that game, I've spent a bunch of time playing it, but then I got to the point where I kind of realized, you know, I've got what I wanted out of this game, and now I don't really need to play it that much anymore. I don't need to go out of my way to min max or anything at this point. It just is what it is, you know. And I think in life sometimes we spend so much time trying to navigate problems, trying to figure out, you know, how am I going to get to a break-even point? How am I going to get to a place where I'm okay? And maybe you're in bad relationships, you're underwater in credit card debt, you have skeletons in the closet, those things where we get ourselves into a rough situation and we don't know how to get out of it. And you spend your whole life trying to figure out the problems. You know, how am I going to stay, you know, with my head above water at work? How am I going to, you know, not lose my financial security? Or how am I going to, you know, make it through another day in my marriage and not lose that, or whatever it might be? You know, we go through life having these fires we're trying to put out, and then one day, if we're blessed and we're lucky, we get to the point where there aren't really fires to put out anymore, because you know what? We put them out. The things that you thought were going to be problems forever, they weren't problems forever. You figured them out. You laid them to rest, and then in a sense, you've retired. You've retired from being a person who lives life in a state of perpetual chaos and worry, frustration, and that sense that you aren't enough. You've gotten past that. For me, I feel like I've got past those things. Life is pretty good overall. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about things. I do feel lonely sometimes. I do feel like there's a sense of what's next. There's a sense of I don't want to be stagnant and not grow or not progress or not be open to new chapters in life's adventure. But overall, every day is pretty much a good day. Life is pretty much good. I don't have any complaints. I don't have any sense that I need to do something to get out of some sort of trouble that I'm in. Life is just peaceful. It's good. It's uneventful in many cases. And that doesn't mean that I spend my life thinking there's nothing interesting going on. You know, I'll tell you, this morning I went on Facebook and I wound up sitting there writing a bunch of responses to comments that had been made on a post I had created about classic video gaming on a Sierra Online fan page. And that may not interest everyone, but it's interesting to me. So I was interacting with people and talking about various aspects of classic gaming. Now, if I was going to go out and tell the world what important thing I've done today, I'd say, you know, I haven't done much, right? I've just checked out a few posts online, played a little bit of City Skylines, and added a few road networks. You know, I didn't do anything incredibly eventful. I didn't do anything that's really noteworthy. But I did have an interesting day to me, you know, and I think silence is something that's important. Silence is something that we try to eliminate. We eliminate those pauses with the uhs and the ums, because there's nothing we're more afraid of than just having empty space. We try to fill every space with something. We expect that everything noteworthy has to be monumental. And then maybe we feel like we don't have much to offer. And it's true, a lot of people want a thrill. They want something that will entertain them right out of the gate. But that's not really what creates a good experience. Often what creates the best experience is something that is good in a kind of a low-key sort of a way. Something that you can make a part of your daily life, and it'll be there for you. And it's not going to be a non-stop mountaintop experience. It's just going to be an all-around positive experience. We get benefit out of life when we don't expect a lot of change immediately, when we're more patient. And that's something we're not comfortable with. We're also not comfortable with seeing things through. So there's that sense of boredom. There's that sense of looking for something better. And I think sometimes there's a place where you're better off just accepting that what you found is meaningful to you, and you don't always look around to see if there's something more entertaining that you could be diverting your attention to. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good. And if it's good, then you let it be. And maybe that turns off a lot of people. Maybe you wind up spending your time alone because other people don't feel like the life you think is interesting is actually interesting to them. And that's okay, because the truth is, if the worst thing going on in your life is that you get up in the morning and you have a sense of peace and you spend time doing things that you think are enjoyable and spiritually satisfying, and you experience that journey of peace alone, is that really the worst thing in the world? To have no problems and to just enjoy your life? Like, that's not a terrible thing. Now, you should be open to sharing your life with others, because there's definitely a satisfaction. There's a value in sharing a journey meaningfully with someone else who's also going to value that journey with you. But that's not most people. And if you feel like you have to put on a show for somebody to get their attention and to prove that you have something to bring to the table, because just being authentic is not enough for them, then ultimately, if they aren't there, that's a win for you, because that's an investment of getting some of your time back. It's giving you the opportunity to not have your time wasted with somebody who may think that you are a waste of their time. And it's hard sometimes when it feels like life is lonely, and it's not that you have problems, it's just that you have to face the reality that as much as you'd like to share your journey with others, it winds up being more of a solo quest. But there's also something to be said for the fact that you can't really rush things. You have to just take things one day at a time and be patient. And if things are meant to be, they are. And if they're not, then you just let them go and continue doing things which you personally enjoy. Sometimes I think about how, I don't like to be lonely, but then I also don't want to be in a relationship where somebody's going to tell me what to think, or someone's going to scold me for how I spend my time, or always seek validation to make sure that I'm doing what they want. Like that sense of being controlled and stifled, always worrying that maybe you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. to be in a relationship where you kind of are treated like, maybe like a child, in the sense that you always feel like you have to give account for what you're doing to someone else. You can never just say, what do I want to do today? What's in my best interest? And then do it. And when you live your life always kind of playing second fiddle to somebody else's opinions and demands and expectations, you never have a chance to know who you are. You never have a chance to formulate your own opinions about things, or to just be yourself. And I think it's super important to have an identity of your own. There's not a lot of that. Most people wind up being defined by others. Just probably because people don't want to be alone. It's in our nature to want companionship. It's in our nature to be social creatures. And so we very easily, very quickly will trade our freedom for a sense of emotional or physical security. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best way to go either. So, you know, I've been thinking a lot about classic adventure games. I used to love King's Quest adventure games from the 80s and 90s. And I was a child in the 90s experiencing Sierra Online adventure games for the first time. And I remember my favorites were King's Quest 1 and 2. And they were simple stories with puzzles to figure out along the way. But the general idea of it was that in King's Quest 1, you were collecting a few magical items which were important to the king and to your kingdom. One of them was a magic mirror that would show the future. One was a magic shield that would protect the bearer from all harm. One was a magic chest, which was always filled with gold. And when you found those three things, you'd bring them back to the king who had sent you off on a quest to find these lost treasures. And at that moment, at the end of the game, he would appreciate your service to the kingdom, and he would die. That was the end of his life. And his final act in life was to appoint you as the new king of Daventry. And I thought about that. I thought about my life, and I thought about the parallels. We have this duty to find lost treasures. Treasures, maybe of wisdom. Not that we can see the future, but wisdom to understand our place in the world. And maybe that's something like that magic mirror that shows the future. The wisdom to know what life is about, what we should strive to be. And sometimes that takes a long time to get to a place where we can be true to ourselves, unencumbered by the vision of others to see the truth. And then there's that coffer of gold. And that's not to say that you have to reach a place where you're wealthy. It's just you have to reach a place where you know how to balance your checkbook. You have to get out of debt. You've got to make sure your fundamentals are solid and you are living within your means. And that's something that a lot of us struggle with for many years of our lives. And then there's that shield, the magic shield that protects us from harm. You know, maybe that's getting rid of things like toxic relationships in our life, getting rid of things that compromise our integrity, so that no matter what happens, we have a certain level of safety net to be able to say that our life is built on firm foundations. What are those things that you need to do to secure your personal kingdom in life? We all have different things, and we know what those things are. And oftentimes it takes us a long time to get there. Working through all those problems, trying to solve the mysteries of ourselves, and trying to get to a place where we can finally say that we're okay and we are worthy to be able to take pride in who we are and where we stand in life's adventure. But then you get to the end of that quest and you realize, okay, I've done what I needed to do. I'm okay. Life is good now. I'm king of my life, right? And then that's when you go into the next quest. And the next quest in King's Quest was to romance the throne. And that might be all about rescuing the girl in the tower. It's about finding romance and finding true love and all of those things. And maybe it's also a little bit more of a metaphor, not just for finding romance, but also for building meaningful social connections, building a legacy, finding ways to connect with other people in a way that's going to allow you to have some part of yourself live on beyond the grave. Maybe it's having a child. Maybe it's adopting a child. Maybe it's writing a book that people will read long after you're dead. Maybe it is any number of other things which are sort of legacy projects. When you say, okay, I've gotten to a point where, my life is good. I'm not living in a place of crisis anymore. But now I have to figure out, what am I going to do with the life that I've been given, with the time that I've been given? And that itself is a quest of its own. Because when you spend your whole life seeking freedom, sometimes when you find freedom, you struggle to know what to do with it. Now, as I draw to a close, I would say, if you are trying to figure out what to do with your freedom, you probably shouldn't be throwing it away. It's very possible to spend your life trying to get out of bad places. And then when you find freedom at last, you're tempted on some level to go back to those things which you've emancipated yourself from. You're tempted to go back to old things which never bore good fruit in your life to begin with. And I think it's important to understand it's better not to progress than to progress in a way that leads to yet another dead end. One fact of those old King's Quest adventures I used to love playing is that they had dead ends. It was possible to miss something that you needed for your quest, to fail to do something in the beginning that was necessary for you to finish and progress later. And if you didn't notice it, you'd wind up having to revert to an earlier save or start over because you hadn't made the right choices earlier on your adventure. Today, games are usually designed so that you don't have any unredeemable failures. If you die, you respawn. But you don't get almost to the end of the game just to find out that you made a small mistake early on, which doomed you to ultimate failure. But in those days, that's how it was. And those games played out much like puzzles. But if they are metaphors for life, it would behoove us to be patient, to take things slow. And when you have peace in your life, don't try to replace it with something. You know, I think about when I mess around with the stock market and I buy a stock or a commodity, I always find there's a certain happiness from selling everything when I'm ahead and just knowing I've kind of hit the save button, basically, and I've locked in the profits. I've settled all of my outstanding things that I've been holding on to for a while, and then I wait for something new to potentially get into. But once you've sold, when you have all this money sitting there and you're just waiting, okay, what do I want to buy next? Then you start to have this FOMO, this sense of fear of missing out. I need to jump in. I need to buy something. And then every opportunity feels like a thing you need to jump on this very minute, because it might be the opportunity of a lifetime. And I think that's oftentimes the most dangerous thing you can do, because usually a thing that's a good buy, a good opportunity, you don't have to do it today. You can watch it and wait and move on it next week. It's going to be okay. If you miss one opportunity, there's going to be more opportunities down the road. So having that sense that you have to jump just because you could jump, I think that that's something to rethink. Let that go. Get to a place where you have peace in your life, and then be at peace with leaving the fields empty, with allowing yourself to rest. And then when you're ready to move on, start to look for opportunities. Be open to opportunities, but don't chase them, because when things are meant to be, they tend to happen effortlessly. And as always, whether you finish your quest in a timely way or not, whether you finish it at all, you can still enjoy the adventure, the sense of wonder along the way, and savor the opportunity to immerse yourself in the small things, which add a sense of joy into your everyday life. As always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time. Thanks for watching.